What kind of questions did you get in your coaching appointments today?
People just feeling overwhelmed and also feeling like they're not doing enough.
Or just vibes? What vibes?
And I think the wariness is coming out of what's going to happen with the job market. And the growth that's been happening there has been the reason we haven't gone into recession. And so it's this, if we think about it in like Brene Brown terms, and like everyone just stop foreboding the joy of our employment rate and get on the train. Let's do this.
Here's to living today fully. We are here again. Ask us anything. And today, Katie, we have I think the conversation in Slack when I shared this with you and Todd, our producer, the emoji reaction to this question was a flame, two flames. So it's on fire. And our producer's response, Todd, was, "Ooh, that's heady." Okay, so we're gonna get into it because we love it. We start maybe with heady and then we break it down. But this comes from a communications executive in Chicago. I did ask how they wanted to be identified, and they really kind of just wanted to stick with that. So
There.
I love how I'm like foregrounding that it's a big question. Here we go. He asks, "Why is loyalty from a company so sought after in a candidate, but then not exercised by the culture at a company? Is there value in protecting yourself in the toxic work culture from the start? Or will you always be viewed as combative because you won't play along with office politics?" I mean, I feel like reading that out loud, I'm like, I need to read it again. There's so
So
much
much
there.
there.
But what would you do if this were a coaching client?
It's so interesting. The word toxic gets thrown around so much. For better or for worse, correctly or incorrectly, definitely something I hear probably once a coaching session, if not more. There are global things that are really toxic in work environments. And we generally have legal, what's the word I'm looking for?
Consequences, ramifications?
Yeah, legal ramifications, when those kinds of toxic behaviors.
Yeah, you're protected by
You're
something.
protected,
Yeah.
discrimination, harassment, hostile work environment. So globally, there are a set of toxic behaviors that employees are able to hold companies accountable. Most toxic behaviors within a workplace are far less overt. And what is toxic for me, Katie, might be different than what causes you to feel toxicity within an environment, or Christine or Allison. And so when I hear this, part of what comes up for me is what are the company values and behaviors that are misaligned with this communication executive? Because my guess is it's not a great fit for them, but it could be for somebody else. And so that's my initial thought.
Ooh, I keyed in on this on 2 words, toxic
Mhm.
and loyalty.
Mhm.
And I have so many questions. This will either annoy people or affirm that, like, the truth of it is, like, we're here to give advice, and so much of the advice that you and I would give would depend on so many things about this person,
Correct.
but we respect your anonymity, and therefore, what came up for me was what is the boundary that this person has that isn't being
Respected.
respected? Yeah. And what is intolerable to this person in this environment? And I completely agree with what you said. I had the exact same response in thinking about the advice of, like, part of me wants to get into this person's work history and, like, how did you decide to join this organization? if in fact the organization is problematic for you, how can your next move be one where you are screening for the things that are really important to you? Because look, you and I both know this too. You can get into a job and be like, it's going to be great. I screened for it. And then shit happens and it isn't great. Right. So I want to be really careful not to say, you saw it coming, keep your eyes wide open, stay alert. It's like, that's not how life works. Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. Something in this question really, I think this person doesn't feel safe at work.
Mhm.
Whose fault is that? I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could be like the employers? Maybe, maybe it's also, no one's fault. Right?
Yeah, yeah. And fault and blame don't help us to resolve the issue, right? Because this person isn't going to be able to change the culture of their current workplace. No individual can make that happen. Truthfully, I know a lot of times people say culture comes from the top, it comes from the C-suite. Even if the C-suiters are championing it, it might not take hold. There has to be buy-in across the board. So for me, what comes up, and it was the same thing you were saying, like, we can screen for it. I mean, we can attentionally evaluate based on questions that are meaningful to us. But that also requires that we're getting a truthful, authentic, genuine response from the prospective employer. And so the three questions, some variation on this that I encourage my clients to ask when they're trying to assess for culture is the first question is what gets rewarded here? What values get rewarded? What behaviors get rewarded? And being able to say to yourself honestly, yeah, that is a value of mine and I behave in congruence with that. Therefore, I can see myself as someone who gets rewarded here. The second question is what gets punished here? I can remember being down at the University of Texas at Austin that is deeply steeped in tradition. And anytime I came forth with an idea or an innovation, it was punished because it was viewed as a slap in the face by the culture that was saying there's nothing to change here. We're pretty perfect. But I couldn't understand why are we so quick to dismiss ideas and innovations and creativity. It was just a misalignment in values. And then the third question being, what goes unnoticed here? If you're a person who needs recognition for particular things, and there are behaviors and practices that go unnoticed or aren't appreciated, that's something to be on the lookout for too. One of the things that I loved doing when I worked in higher education was presenting at conferences. And there is great benefit to me. I always thought there was great benefit to the institution I was at, but not every place I worked held that up as something to get rewarded or punished. It just went unnoticed, which sometimes is even more hurtful or toxic for an individual, depending on what that thing that goes unnoticed is. And so those three questions can be really helpful if you are self-aware and clear with who you are and what you want.
That to me really speaks to, okay, listener, we hear you. I want us to tackle like, what do you do now in the current environment? And we got you for what's next. So like definitely thinking about, if in fact you're finding that you're having to change who you are, that one of the things we like to say is it's probably good to change where you are after after you've gone through the self-evaluation and looking at what your part has been in the relationship, which doesn't, we're not talking about fault. We're just talking about your presence and what you've brought in and what you've learned for yourself. So that future, those three questions like this helps you set up for the future. I think part of what I would like to invite the listener to do is to think about what do you need to feel safe to be who you are in an environment. And we're talking about UT Austin. Let's talk about Houston now too. Brené Brown, right? Like
Mm,
The Braving Trust framework comes to mind. And Katie, you can rattle these off much quicker than I do, but the first one the B in Braving Trust in that framework is boundaries.
mhm,
So my work with this client, what I would advise is like, what are your sort of non-negotiables? And that comes from your values. And look, if an environment violates your boundaries on a routine basis, right? Maybe that is toxic, maybe you do leave, but you got to be really clear on what those are and why that's coming up for you and be willing to stand by those. Otherwise, you're going to get to this next place even if you do all this screening and you might have the same experience, you know?
and once you feel like you have that clarity and, semblance of psychological safety with someone, some decision maker in the organization, and psychological safety being at a very basic level, the absence of interpersonal fear. If you feel safe enough with someone to say, I've done this self-reflection, this self-inventory, here's where I've found misalignments for myself. And part of it can be being able to share, I've never expressed this to anyone before, that this is something that I need to feel good about my work, purposeful in my work, safe in my work. People can't meet our needs if we don't express them. So I would encourage the person who wrote in, have you wait to really ask yourself, have I expressed these needs? And if I haven't, who do I feel safe in the organization expressing these needs to? Now, this is top of mind for me because in therapy, I am being encouraged to express my needs
Yes.
and more often. But it's so true. We can't get our needs met if we don't express them. Now, if those needs are unable to be met and you are told that this is not something we can deliver on, then beginning to explore by talking to people in your network, by talking to people in your family, these are the things that I want to be rewarded for at work. These are the things that I want to make sure align with me. Who do you know that works at companies like this? Also, when you go on LinkedIn or your job search board of choice, instead of typing in the role that you want, typing in the qualities of a culture that you want and just starting to make a list of what are the companies that pop when I type in the words courage, learning, and justice. Those are my three core values. What companies pop up? And those then can be places that I start looking at for future opportunities. I am much more future focused than present focused today. I don't know if that's helpful to this listener.
You know what? It's gotta be both. Not helpful and unhelpful. They have to do both.
Mhm,
I have to do both. I think for this listener, what I feel in the question is like what anger and anxiety make us feel, which is like, I gotta do, right? And protecting myself, right? They're already in a posture of stress response. And I imagine, I don't know anything about this person's background, but I imagine that that has been very effective for them in any number of settings, right? What we're asking the listener to do and the questioner to do is to be thoughtful about what's next. We are not saying like don't take action, but here's how I think about it, Katie. It's like currently there's needs you have that you may have expressed and someone has said, "Nope, can't do it." What we're thinking is you haven't yet. And so let's do that first. And to do that, hopefully, with someone that you can trust, maybe the person that hired you, practice with a coach, practice with a friend first. Katie is, as she said, practicing speaking up for her needs with me. Yay. Love it.
mhm,
And then, if you're told or shown that we can't meet those needs, then we really want, and maybe you do this concurrently with step two, which is moving into like, who do you know? Looking at job boards, knowing your values, having done the boundaries work, and seeking things out that align directly with what you've discovered, right? And then maybe we start interviewing, or at least, when we get into conversations with organizations, asking those beautiful three questions like what gets rewarded, what gets punished, and what goes unnoticed. I think especially with like what gets punished, I'm very wary of organizations where there are no consequences for value misaligned behavior.
Yes.
Like there has to be, in my opinion, there should be clear next steps for everything that comes up at work.
Mhm.
Right? I don't want any employee ever muddling through, "I don't feel safe here," and then they're a flight risk, quote unquote, and then they leave. Like, no, no, no. How do we mitigate for that?
Yeah.
But that's my personality. So that's what I'm hearing in like these 3 current, and then like transitional and future stages for this person.
Yeah, transitional and future stages, and also, I mean, and you use this word tolerance, right? What can
Mhm.
we tolerate? But also, it is taking between 4 and 6 months for people to start a search
Mm.
and get an offer. And so it's not like when we were moving through 2021 with the Great Resignation, you could snap your fingers and kind of have a new job at a 20 to 30% increased salary. The jobs are still there, they're still available. There's more competition and it's taking a longer time. However, when I work with clients too, and Emily, I'm sure this is part of the work you do as well. How do we make work more tolerable for you until we can get you to the next place that you're wanting to go? A lot of that can be mindset. This is not permanent. Reminding yourself this is not permanent. This is not forever. I am taking action to leave, move on, whatever it might be. But also thinking about the skills you want to develop, the things you want to learn, how can you use your current situation as a vehicle for that? So when I was working in commercial real estate, which was completely values misaligned for me, I was also going to graduate school at night. I'm getting my master's degree in counseling. And I'm like, I don't think I can muddle through this for another 4 to 6 months until it's time for me to go full into the degree program. And then I just said, you know what? I'm going to practice everything I'm learning in the classroom in the workplace. And I started practicing my counseling skills at work, not in an unethical way, not in a let's unearth your deepest, darkest secrets and trauma, but how can I use the micro counseling skills when I'm interacting with my colleagues, right? How can I use these other tools and strategies? And it made the 9 to 5 more tolerable because I was
Mm.
doing something for me. And so I would also encourage the listener to think about what skills do you want to advance, what things do you want to learn, and how can you insert those into your day alongside your job.
See, that is very applicable in the present moment, Katie. You do both. Present.
It only took me 20 minutes to get there.
I plus one that. There is, I will just say this, so much more that we could say about this. I feel like we should do a future Ask Us Anything about loyalty. We didn't even get into loyalty. And that I think is a issue fraught for a lot of people about who am I loyal to? For what? What does loyalty even mean? We'll get there in the future, but for now, wow. I hope we've helped I know we've helped this listener. I feel it in my bones. I was helped every freaking time we do one of these. I just wrote down like 5 things that I'm gonna be using in my practice. You teach me so much.
Right back at you, friend.
Oh,
Business
friend.
partner friend.
I know,
Your
business
to my Kelly.
confidant, consigliere. If you have a question, please, please, please reach out to us. You can do it in a variety of different ways. Who's Missing Podcast / Ask Us Anything. You can submit a question there. You can drop into our DMs. Just let us know what you want us to share about you. It is really helpful to give folks some context. We're really committed to addressing systemic isms. And so the more you can tell us that is safe and feels good to you, the better, just so we can make sure we're appreciating the full person asking us. And reach out to us anytime. Thanks for listening, everybody. Deuces. Katie, you killed it.